I've read a troubling story today in the London Times, and this has also been reported in several other sources. Hasn't really made any news, broadcast news here in the UK. I suspect because the leadership race, by the way, that's incense in case anyone's wondering. Um, the leadership race here is the main headline, but hasn't really been reported at all. I'm going to check Euronews and other sources to see if it's been mentioned in any broadcast news. And apparently, a German politician has been assassinated, not just attacked violently, but actually murdered. So I'm going to read out the report. Bear with me, it's a little bit lengthy, but I think it's important that you understand the full context. Then I'll comment a bit about it afterwards. A veteran German politician who was killed with a shot to the head in his front garden may have been the victim of a far right assassination. Walter Lubcke, I assume that's how that's pronounced, it's got the German umlaut above the U. 65, president of Kassel Council in the state of Hesse, central Germany, was found in a pool of blood outside his family home at a nearby village early on June the 2nd. He died in hospital a few hours later, leaving a wife, two sons, and a baby grandchild. The police believe that he was shot at close range with a pistol just above his right ear. No weapon was found and there was no ballistic residues on his clothing, suggesting that it was not suicide. The motive and the identity of the killer remain unclear. A younger man said to have a private relationship with the victim was arrested but released without charge yesterday. One theory is that Mr Lubcke was shot by a man following a dispute in an agricultural fair in his village, Ishta, the previous day. Mr Lubcke, a long-standing member of Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats, also had many enemies in the German ultranationalist underground, however, after his outspoken defense of the government's migration policies during the 2015 refugee crisis. He was subsequently given police protection after a tirade of online hate messages, including several death threats which have resurfaced sporadically since. Far right social media accounts have revelled in the news of his death. One less disgusting rat. Now for the others, wrote one YouTube user posted. Another wrote, "This will not be the last death. The war has begun." That's the sort of mentality that's out there. The outbursts were condemned by senior politicians. President Steinmeier said they were cynical, tasteless, abominable, and in every regard obnoxious, and Heiko Maas, the foreign minister, called them disgusting. Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, leader of the CDU, called for the owners of the accounts to be en masse and held responsible. I am all for freedom of expression, but what I want to discuss how we deal with one another on the internet, she told Bild am Sonntag yesterday. One dramatic example that moves me deeply is the murder of Walter Lubcke. I knew him personally through several meetings, so I am all the more appalled that his family not only has had to live with the existential shock of discovering that their husband and father was murdered, but also that his death has been greeted on the web with hatred, malice, and undisguised joy. That is an attack on the basic rules of our common existence. Mr. Lubcke, who wrote a doctoral thesis on the Soviet Union's early attempts at a planned economy and farmed his family estate, entered local politics in the 1980s and held a seat in Hesse state parliament from 1999 to 2009. In October 2015, a month after Mrs. Merkel opened Germany's borders to more than a million migrants, he was confronted by right-wing activists at a disorderly public meeting in a town near Kassel. Mr. Luke had told his critics that public life depended on Christian values such as helping those in need, and that anyone who does not believe in these values can leave the country at any time. This speech turned him into a hate figure for the far right, one writer implying that he should be liquidated in a concentration camp. Okay, let me just say this from the absolute get go. There is absolutely no justification whatsoever for cold-blooded assassination in this way of a man unarmed in his own home, leaving his family in that way. It's appalling, and no one can say, "Oh well, the killers were pushed to do it because of his politics or something like that." They chose to do this. They chose to murder a man in cold blood. They are far right extremists, and I'm going to call them that. Other sources have suggested that the particular group that has been leaving these posts, actually take issue with Germany's post-war borders. So they want basically a return of the Third Reich. Um, that's the sort of people that are glorifying in this man's death. Now, that there's no caveat to that. There is no whataboutery. There is no, oh well, his politics got him killed or something like that. Just like the death of Joe Cox, there is no excuses whatsoever. I also believe that it would be a good gesture if the British government um, sent out a message of condolence to his family if they haven't done so already, because Germany and other nations sent out condolences when Joe Cox was murdered, and over similar reasons. So I think it would be a good gesture at this time of fractious relations between London and Berlin just to send out a message of condolence um, to his family. Now, as for his politics, I do think that Angela Merkel's 2015 decision was reckless. I think there is no question about that. And um, obviously, Mr. Lubcke, excuse me, my pronunciation of German names is not great. Mr. Lubcke obviously supported the Chancellor. Um, but what his opponents could have done is oppose him at the ballot box or by peaceful protests. I think the fact that they're glorifying his death definitely, it is unsolved, but I think it definitely raises serious question marks over the culpability in it. I mean, put it this way: if a politician associated with the right, let's say someone like Nigel Farage or Marine Le Pen, was assassinated, would there be people saying, oh, well, they didn't listen to the people? There is no excuse for cold blooded assassination. Um, People can oppose the CDU policies, people can oppose Angela Merkel. And I do think that Germany made a very big gamble with that decision. I don't. I think it was incredibly reckless. But are we now in a situation where political assassination is now going to be normalized as a way to express differences of view? People get strong opinions in politics. A lot of people get angry about a lot of things, but we cannot have a situation where elected politicians are gunned down and there's this mentality of, oh, well, they didn't listen to the people. I mean, many Germans will agree with Angela Merkel, many others will disagree. But in a democracy, you express differences of opinion by rigorous debate, by opposition at the ballot box, by peaceful protest, not by the bullet. So it's shocking. And unfortunately, their threats probably aren't idle. There probably will be more assassinations. Um, I think that it's totally legitimate to oppose Germany's immigration policies, and that does not make people racists. But this cannot be the answer to gun down politicians who you don't agree with. That's absolutely, I mean, there's plenty of politicians I dislike, but if I decided to get a gun and kill them, I would be an assassin and I would rightly go to jail for a long time or be shot by police. It's it cannot be normalized. And I do find it troubling that there is definitely a rise in the far right. And I'm saying it far right. I know that triggers certain people, but that's what it is. Far right is far right. These people are neo Nazis. They want Germany's post war borders redrawn. I mean, we're not talking about centre right people who disagree with Merkel's immigration policy. We're talking about some hardcore blood and soil nationalists here. And I'm a bit tired of people trying to deny it. Just as some on the left are too much in denial of Islamic extremism, some on the right, frankly, are too much in denial of the rise of the far right. There's no excuse for what's happening. There's no excuse for this sort of extremism. Like I say, if people don't like Merkel's policies or May's policies or Macron's policies, they can be voted out at the ballot box. There's ways to oppose them peacefully. This is not the way to do it.